Hello everyone, and welcome to another story time with GreenGimmick. Once again, we're returning to the book Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark for another spooky story. Just like last time, I'm going to try to do this in one go, so whatever stutters, mispronunciations, and weird background noise you may hear is going to stay in there. So, wrap yourself up in your favorite blanket, curl up nice and close to the speaker, and enjoy the story. The Haunted House, from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, by Alvin Schwartz, with illustrations by Stephen Gamble. One time a preacher went to see if he could put a haunt to rest at a house in his settlement. The house had been haunted for about 10 years. Several people had tried to stay there all night, but they would always get scared out by the haunt. So this preacher took his Bible and went to the house, went on in, built himself a good fire and lit a lamp. He sat there reading the Bible. Then, just before midnight, he heard something start up the cellar, walking back and forth, back and forth. Then it sounded like someone was trying to scream and got choked off. There was a lot of thrashing around and struggling, and finally everything got quiet. The old preacher took up his Bible again. Before he could start reading, he heard the footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. He sat watching the door to the cellar, and the footsteps kept coming closer and closer. He saw the doorknob turn, and the door began to open. He jumped up and hollered, "What do you want?" The door shut back easy-like, and there wasn't a sound. The preacher was trembling a little, but he finally opened the Bible and read a while. Then he got up and laid the book on the chair and went to mending the fire. The haunt started walking again, and step, 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 up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat watching the door, saw the doorknob turn and the door open. It looked like a young woman. He backed up and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The haunt sort of swayed like she didn't know what to do, then just faded out. The old preacher waited, and when he didn't hear any more noises, he went over and shut the door. He was sweating and trembling all over, but he was a brave man, and he thought he'd be able to see through it. So he turned his chair to where he could watch and sat down and waited. It wasn't long before he heard the haunt to start up again. Slowly, step, 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 closer and closer, step, step, and it was right at the door. The preacher stood up, held his Bible out before him. Then the knob slowly turned, and the door opened wide. This time the preacher spoke quiet-like. He said, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, who are you and what do you want?" The haunt came right across the room, straight to him, and took hold of his coat. It was a young woman about 20 years old. Her hair was torn and tangled, and the flesh was dropping off her face, so he could see the bones and parts of her teeth. She had no eyeballs, but there was sort of a blue light in the back of her eye sockets. She had no nose to her face. And when she started talking, it sounded like the voice was coming and going with the wind blowing. She told him her lover killed her for her money and buried her in the cellar. She said if the preacher could dig up her bones and bury her properly, she could rest. Then he told her to take the joint end of her little finger from her left hand, laid it in the collection plate at the next church meeting, and he'd find out who had murdered her. And she said, "If you come back once more after that, you'll hear my voice at midnight, and I'll tell you where my money is hid, and you can give it to the church." The haunt sobbed like she was tired, and sank down towards the floor, and was gone. The preacher found her bones and buried them in the graveyard. The next Sunday, the preacher put the finger bone in the collection plate, and when a certain man happened to touch it, it stuck to his hand. The man jumped up and rubbed and scrabbed and tore at the bone trying to get it off, and then he went screaming like he was going crazy. Well, he confessed to the murder, and they took him on to jail. After the man was hung, the preacher went back to the house one midnight, and the haunt's voice told him to dig under the hearthrock. He did. He found a big sack of money. And where the haunt had held his coat, the print of those bony fingers was burned right into the cloth. It never did come out.